This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And now we have started NBA Summer League. So now the off-season chapter is now fully in gear. Fresh off of all the craziness that's happened during free agency and probably too many transactions to get into, but certainly it gives us a theme as far as what the tenor is with the NBA, the organizations refixing and resituating themselves in preparation, for the impact of the collective bargaining agreement and how this is impacting the way that they're putting their teams together and where a lot of those free agents are. But nevertheless, man, we got to walk through it, talk through it. So, of course, I'm going to roll out the big red carpet to my man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren ripping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, as he's getting himself prepared to make way out there to Levi, Las Vegas. What's up, brother?
I'm doing good, man. And I got to say, for one of the first years ever, I feel like we are like in line, I guess is a better way, with free agency. A lot of times we record our shows and something superly major happens after we've recorded. For the most part, the big deals have happened right before we've recorded. So we're able to get that in and not have to do any emergency pods. And even like another big deal, like the largest free agent name gets signed the night before we record here today. So I'm excited about that aspect. And then also, as always, opportunity to tap in with Las Vegas, one of my favorite cities out there, as USA basketball is going to be in town, as also the Summer League as well, too, taking place with its annual festivities.
Yeah. And I guess, this is where the NBA should get its kudos and get its props, for the way that it is continually evolving and changing, the opening of free agency, with the way that they lay things out, where I think a lot of teams caught up in the hoop and the hype of what the media wants to clamor or cling on to. And then at the same time, balancing this so that it gives opportunity for their other events, to be at the forefront and not really get caught up in the glitz of everything that's been taking place, just through players and, them, sweating teams out and, sweating contracts out and stuff like that. So, good on the NBA, man. Like, once these transactions happens, once everything kind of falls into place, boom, 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 we're on to the next thing. And I think that's what you want. Like, you don't want to miss out on anything or miss on anything not being discussed. But I think it's good that, we're able to transition and be able to stay on top of or keep up with those trends and dynamics. And each of these particular transactions have a life of its own. They have a good shelf life. And we see where that immediate impact is reflected, as we transition into the next stages of what the NBA offseason should feel like.
Yeah, I agree. I think the aspect of like the schedule changes, the way that the second apron, the way you can negotiate with your players, right after the end of the finals, a lot of it's our first year, it was our first summer trying to understand what all of that would look like. But again, from a podcasting standpoint, it allowed for such synergy for us specifically, even with the days, the way things fell this year specifically. We'll see if that will continue to lend in our favor. But ultimately, we're all learning and understanding the kind of like this new ecosystem of NBA free agency, the NBA offseason as it relates to when you can sign, how you can sign, and the moratorium and all those other things. Like I said, it's evolving, but I think we've done a really good job in the league, as you alluded to, did an amazing job rolling it out this year, so that the news is really kind of more spread out. It's more even as opposed to like this big news dump, kind of all in one section. There's still a lot of signings, but at the end of the day, I thought it was more palatable for the consumer.
Absolutely. A lot for us to get into. We got some deals that we want to definitely kind of highlight and discuss over the last few days. And as always, man, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week. Be sure to give my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. If you want to catch us, you can go to www.baselinenba.com to check out not just this show, but also the list of episodes, the catalog of episodes that we lay out for your listening pleasure, for those who've been down with the Baseline for so long, right? Also, if you see us on YouTube and you see the blue and white logo, you know that we're at the 19 Media Group family. So be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com, not only to check us out, but check out the great family of content creators that's a part of the 19 Media Group family. 19 Media Group, we run in these content streets. So let's get right into it, Shaw. one of the big deals that has taken place within the last 72 hours are the Sacramento Kings' ability to acquire DeMar DeRozan. He'll be signing a 3-year, $74 million deal. It's basically a sign and trade deal. The San Antonio Spurs land Harrison Barnes and also a 2031 pick swap. And then the Chicago Bulls involved in this deal, because DeMar DeRozan was formerly with the Chicago Bulls. They'll add Chris Duarte on their roster, and they'll also get 2 second-round picks and some cash considerations. So I want to get your take on this one, Shaw. Do you think that this trade, and I want you to assess for each team, is good for the books or good for the looks?
Well, it depends which team you're talking about first, right? So when it comes to the books and looks, I think the Spurs probably are the ultimate winner here. Obviously, DeRozan is the prize of the deal, but Harrison Barnes, a super professional veteran guy who can go in there and play alongside Victor Wembanyama. Obviously, they got Chris Paul in tow as well, too. That Spurs team has just become a lot more mature very, very quickly and should have a level of competitiveness that Victor should like to want to see. Yes, there's still some pieces away, and they still have Keldon Johnson. They still have Devin Vassell as well, too. So I like what the Spurs have done this offseason, continuing to gain draft equity on top of it as well. And you're going to see Victor really have a more competitive team in year 2. So books and looks, I think the Spurs won headed by far and away. Sacramento, from their side, they get now somebody who's a bona fide scorer. Yes, even at age 34, 35 years old. And that's why that last deal, I think, is non-guaranteed, for them, because he will be obviously a little bit more up there in age, but he's still a 20-point per game guy. And, with Fox and Sabonis there already, Malik Monk as well, this is going to be a heavily potent offensive team. Now, we already know, and we know from your side as well, CL, exactly, like the defense is going to be not even lacking. It's going to be non-existent. The team is going to struggle to stop people each and every single night, but they think they can kill it with fire, as I like to say, offensively. And DeRozan allows them a true bona fide scorer, a clutch scorer, in addition to Fox. Remember, Fox was, the fourth quarter guy, 2 years ago. DeRozan ended up finished second behind Curry last year in that. So you get 2 of the better clutch performers in the game when it comes to fourth quarter execution offensively. Sabonis as well there too. You bring Malik Monk back. I like what the Kings have done here in this. And then the Bulls, they just get off the money. What I do like this, though, for them as well, is like they can't seem to get rid of Zach LaVine. So I was worried about the Giddey Kobe White situation, to be very honest with you, because I was like, well, you brought Giddey there now. Where does that leave Kobe, who had a breakout year? Now you can play Kobe albeit an undersized 2, but he will now be the 2 guard, if you will, and Zach will probably just slide up to the 3, and then that's kind of like your 3 guard rotation there in Chicago. So Duarte will come up the bench there. So makes sense for all teams. I think San Antonio is the biggest winner, both short and long term. But in the short term, Sacramento gets exactly what they wanted, another bona fide player.
Yeah, I mean, Sacramento, I look at this and I say to myself, I'm like, wow, did they struggle with having to part with Harrison Barnes? Because for the longest time, Shaw, I had always wondered to myself, with the youth movement that had taken place, and remember where my feelings were with Sacramento about where is it that you're planning to upgrade this team if they don't show that they are good enough, say to get past the Golden State Warriors, or they're good enough to get past a play-in tournament, play-in situation, or get past the first round. And I feel like maybe, they recognize that there's very little room. If you're committed to Fox and you're committed to Sabonis as your corner pieces, somewhere along the line, this team's roster has to get upgraded. Something has to be improved upon, or you have to change the dynamic in some way, shape, or form if you're expecting to compete or stay up with the rest of the teams now that have suddenly emerged as being, the top gunners in the West, right? You're looking at the Dallas Mavericks, you're looking at Oklahoma City Thunder. Listen, if you want to throw the New Orleans Pelicans into the mix, you could certainly do that. So to me, obviously something had to give when it came to wherever it is that you're planning to upgrade this team. So getting DeMar DeRozan, I find it to be an interesting upgrade, because now it's the lean in more on the offensive side of things. Where I trouble myself with all of this, Shaw, is, does this make the Kings better, right? Like, I don't think there's a question that they'll be better offensively, but does that necessarily make them a better team in the landscape of what the Sacramento Kings would look like in the Western Conference. Because to me, I mean, you could still make the argument that the Golden State Warriors might still wind up having a better roster than the Sacramento Kings. And I think now this puts a lot of the onus on De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis really, really stepping up, like taking their games to such a next level. Not to say that DeMar DeRozan is not going to complement or help them. I'm just more interested on how DeMar DeRozan will complement and help them as it pertains to their competitiveness in the Western Conference. Maybe not more so than in the division itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question. So part of what the Kings also did this year was they traded Davion Mitchell to Toronto. They got back Jalen McDaniels. So, trying to get some wing play there. There's conversations on McDaniels and his ability to, does he really like basketball? Unlike Jaden McDaniels, in Minnesota. Jalen seems to be having a hard time sticking with the team. This team does not have any size at all, like literally zero size. So you bring in DeRozan, you bring in McDaniels, they signed Jordan McLaughlin as well too, kind of like right after the DeRozan situation. They're going to struggle to defend. I think there's no two ways about it. So they're going to be playing a lot of small ball, looking a lot like the Pacers, I think, of the early part of last year, scoring in the 140s and just hoping that, again, you can just truly kill it with fire. Keegan Murray taking another step. He's going to have to become more than just a 3-point shooter and scorer. He's going to have to rebound at a higher level, to kind of keep those other guys off the glass and not giving up second chance points. So while they do lack the size, you can try to scheme some of this. Mike Brown and company can figure out a way to get better defensive principles in there. But I do have the same concerns. While I like the DeRozan fit for what it can do for them, especially in clutch situations, they do lack size, and they are going to really be struggle to defend anybody this offseason. I mean, this upcoming season, and we don't know if they're going to be able to do anything to do that, especially at this late stage when all the other quote unquote even medium sized names are already off and on other teams in free agency.
I will say, though, Shaw, that it is a very interesting play by the San Antonio Spurs to get Harrison Barnes in this. Listen, there's no question from a maturation standpoint, this team will certainly be at a level that gives us the perception that they are going to be a competitive team for Wemby to play with or play on. I find it interesting because I'm thinking about the Popovich dynamic. I don't think there'll be a problem with what Popovich is going to ask of Chris Paul to be able to do and orchestrate the offense and really help this team out. Where I wonder is, what version of Harrison Barnes is going to emerge from this, right? I think Harrison Barnes has been like the consummate team guy. He's been the consummate sacrifice guy. This could be another opportunity for Harrison Barnes to play himself for maybe one final good contract. And there's opportunity here where he can have an impact on both sides of the basketball still. I think, listen, he's still in his early 30s?
32.
Yeah. I mean, so he still has, a good shelf life here where, he could very much be a younger version of the Rudy Gay that the San Antonio Spurs had for a few seasons that DeMar DeRozan had the luxury of playing with that snuck them into certain, playoffs and playoff scenarios, right? So I could possibly see that with a guy like Harrison Barnes because I think there's opportunity there where he can really thrive playing next to Wemby and having a facilitator like Chris Barnes. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this, what comes of it. But there's no question, to your point, on paper and for what it looks like, this has elevated the San Antonio Spurs much more to being a competitive team in an already competitive division for themselves. I don't know what that yields as far as wins go, and I'm glad we'll talk about that later on when we do our previews for what the expectations are for the Spurs for this upcoming season. But I definitely think that there are more wins on the table with the combination of Wemby, Paul, and Harrison Barnes than what they had with the roster they had constructed going into the season last year.
Yeah, the other aspect too is they still remain flexible. Chris Paul is on a 1-year deal. Barnes has 2 years left on his deal. Veteran guys who, hey, if it doesn't go the way you want it to, it's not long-term money on top of it, and you can maybe flip those guys again. So, because there is going to be a little bit of a logjam with Vassell, Johnson, Sohan, and Barnes in those wing positions. Somebody's either going to play out of position or somebody's minutes are just not going to be there on a regular basis. But not to mention that this Spurs team also drafted Stephon Castle, from UConn. So getting the defensive chops in there to back up behind Chris Paul, like, to me, you see why the Spurs organization is one of the better ones out there. They're doing most of the right things. The only misstep they had, I think a lot of people felt like they should have kept the guy that they traded to Minnesota. I think Rottingham, that point guard is supposed to be very explosive. And like, hey, why couldn't you kept him as well too, instead of kicking the can down the road for a draft pick, I think in 2030? Outside of that, they've had a really successful offseason. And if they end up flipping Chris Paul and or Harrison Barnes, at the trade deadline and get even more assets, we're really just going to be like, yo, this is a masterclass, I think, in general management from the San Antonio Spurs.
Here they go, yo. Here they go. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we'll be discussing a couple more transactions that have hit the wire over the last week or so, including the Los Angeles Lakers, Cavaliers, and Golden State Warriors. But first, are you ready to elevate your fantasy sports experience? With Prize Picks, you can win up to 100 times your money. Imagine turning a $10 entry into a whopping $1,000. The summer is full of sports, and there's no better time to get in on the action. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week, from lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. With the finals over, the hoops action doesn't stop on Prize Picks. Women's basketball is still heating up, with stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves. Alongside greats like Breanna Stewart and Asia Wilson, you can win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. Prize Picks is the best way to mix and match your selections across sports. Sean and I grew up playing baseball, so we love to mix a little variety with our picks from America's pastime. And for those of you who love a quick win, Prize Picks is the way to go. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Plus, with quick withdrawals and an enormous selection of players and stat types, it's no wonder Prize Picks is the go-to app for fantasy sports. So what are you waiting for? Download the Prize Picks app today and use promo code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's right. Prize Picks will match your deposit and give you more to play with. Remember, with Prize Picks, it's as simple as picking more or picking less. So let's get those entries in. Watch the winnings roll in. It's that easy. Don't forget to use the promo code CLNS to get your deposit match, and stay tuned for more basketball insights right here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Let's play and win together with Prize Picks. More Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw. Don't go away. All right, and we're back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, as we continue our conversation of the free agency movements that have taken place over the last week. Shaw, Los Angeles Lakers, LeBron, the King. He re-ups on a 2-year, $101 million deal, including a no-trade clause and trade kicker. And also to add to boot, Nate McMillian and Scott Brooks have been added to JJ Redick's staff. I'm indifferent about this. I don't think that anybody questioned that, this is exactly what this would have come to. I think if you're LeBron James, you're right where you need to be with this. And this is well played. It's smartly played by someone, who commands and almost pretty much dictates the movements of what takes place, not just with negotiating agreements with the organization and the team that you play for. Especially helps when you bring them a championship, right, in your tenure. But more importantly, this allows a lot of flexibility and room for LeBron James over the next couple of years to really kind of determine and control and kind of at his own pace determine what his future is going to look like. But in the meantime, I think the overall outlook of this is about Nate McMillian and Scott Brooks joining JJ Redick's staff. I find this to be an interesting mix because Nate McMillian, Scott Brooks always have been known for defensive principles, and with JJ Redick, clearly he is that of an offensive-minded type of person, and I'm sure he's going to lean in these guys to really help move the Lakers in a better direction defensively, while JJ figures out what he wants to see of this team offensively.
Well, I'll start with the coaching thing and then go back to LeBron. So I like the move because I think Scott Brooks and Nate McMillian, I think they've won Coach of the Years before, or the case to be, and been highly regarded. But to me, it's like they're good, but not too good. Kind of not in the way like they're not NBA championship level coaches where they'd come in and truly overshadow JJ. So I think it's the right mix for what he's probably looking to, put his stamp on.
It's not like Byron Scott being the head coach and Jason Kidd is sitting on your bench. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, you messed this up, brother.
Yeah, I don't think one of these guys are even
Yeah.
thinking about snaking JJ, for that. I think they're settled. They've had their runs at it, and there might even be better suited as number 2 and number 3 guys, moving forward. So good move in terms of getting the experience on the sidelines alongside JJ, which we both thought was needed. I know our guy Jabari should be excited about that. On the LeBron side, he takes $3 million less to keep the Lakers out of that second apron. So it gives them some level of flexibility. The no trade clause, perfectly befitting of a person of LeBron's stature. There's not anybody like LeBron, honestly. And then obviously the trade kicker, if he were to agree to a trade. So kind of the double whammy there. If something were to happen with him here in this next year, or if assuming he opts into the next year after that, the second year, then he'd still have those options available to him. But for me, it's the aspect of the fact he was willing to take less money, and for certain players, and whoever you want to believe the list, who was actually on that list, from Valanciunas to DeRozan to Klay, none of those guys came. None of those guys looked at the Lakers situation and said, yeah, I want to go and do that. So while this Los Angeles Lakers team should ultimately still be competitive in the Western Conference, I don't think this is a championship roster. I think they realize that as well, even with JJ Redick and, getting Connect, from where is he from, Tennessee or whatever the case may be, to come in to play alongside them. Some people saying he's still in the draft. There's a lot of propaganda that always follows the Lakers, and, like, hey, we're going to overly laud some of their moves. I don't doubt that he's a very good basketball player, but still in the draft might be a little bit far, at least for me. At the end of the day, this Lakers team will still be competitive, as I alluded to, and LeBron is going to be made a hero for save the team $3 million, and I think he didn't have to do that. So, but I don't know what this means in terms of their short-term and long-term future right now, because the fact that he was willing to take less to get certain guys to come and they didn't come says more about this organization, and maybe even LeBron's standing, I think, with certain players, at least. Not that he's not a good individual and not a good teammate or none of that, but I don't know if they're looking at him and saying, okay, well, I have my best chances to win is going to hitch my wagon to LeBron. And I think that's a far cry from where we were, obviously, a couple years ago.
Well, it's funny how everything changed in a year, right? I mean, a year removed, this team was playing in the Western Conference Finals. Okay, so it's interesting how you use that P word. The other P word I was thinking of was pomp and circumstance, right? Like, I just think it's somewhat befitting with the way that the organization has operated, so to speak, that they kind of shot themselves in the foot. All right. I think if you're, for example, if your intent is that you're trying to pull Klay Thompson, look at where Klay Thompson has been. Forget his, how he soured with the organization, in the last year. He understands what this organization has also done for him, right, as well too. He understands what a professional organization has to look like, or what it has to feel like for them to sustain the level of dominance that the Golden State Warriors had when he was on that roster. And listen, let's not snuff the idea or the possibility that this team, the Golden State Warriors can still be a competitive basketball team and can position themselves in some way, maybe to elevate, regardless of the fact that the Lakers have Anthony Davis and LeBron James, to still elevate themselves to be better than, or be in a better position to play in a Western Conference Finals or in the NBA Finals. I feel like more people today feel more confident about the Warriors organization doing that than, say, the Lakers organization, which, is kind of crazy considering to what you were just saying. You've got LeBron James and you've got Anthony Davis already on your roster. That should be a gimme, right? That's a layup on the idea about who should be getting to the finals faster. But with all that being said, Shaw, I think you look at this situation with what happened with hiring JJ Redick. I think you look at this situation with the Los Angeles Lakers and let's call it as we see it, and them drafting Bronny James. I think and to me, it gives off the perception that there are other priorities going on, other than the perception of saying we are best positioning ourselves where we're trying to win a championship. And that's not to take anything away from, but you can't put that only on LeBron James to help them sell the idea that, well, it's because I'm on this roster, that we're going to always be competing and playing for a championship. Come on, man. You know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't fly anymore. You know what I'm saying? LeBron James has already had those iterations where he's watched himself struggle through teams winning and losing, and he's done it with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he's also done it with the Los Angeles Lakers. So I think now it's about what the players know that they see on them feeling comfortable, whether or not they want to be on board with all of this other stuff that's going on other than what should be really the ultimate focus, which is, are we all on the same page about getting ourselves through that Western Conference gauntlet and eventually trying to compete to win an NBA championship at the end of this thing? And I just don't think a lot of players believed in that idea, that concept. And I think as soon as you see that, the Los Angeles Lakers said, they can't pull no Ari Gold on this one, man. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They ain't watching enough Entourage for that. So
I appreciate the way that you said that as well too, because even in my intro to that is like, maybe it was an oversimplification. Like, this isn't LeBron's fault. This is a Lakers organization situation. So people turned against the Lakers, not LeBron James, as I think I was probably more unintentionally indicating to. That's not really what I meant. So I thank you for cleaning that up, or even correcting me, because it is a systemic situation that, hey, look at, well, LeBron and JJ's there now, as you alluded to. All right, what's the situation? AD had a healthy year, but what's really the situation? Is Genie really running the team the right way? Who's really in charge there? Is it LeBron? Is it Rambis? Is it Blinka? Is it Genie? So there's a lot of, I think, context to people not wanting to join the Lakers, as opposed to just not wanting to join LeBron James. So I think that's an appropriate way to kind of, close that conversation. While LeBron did everything he could to quote unquote air quote recruit people, even by taking and putting it out there, he's willing to take less money. That wasn't enough to, as you alluded to, snuff out all the other stuff that's permeating around this organization.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Shaw. Let's focus our attention to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Donovan Mitchell, 3-year extension, $150. So now the question is, what does that mean for Darius Garland?
Yeah, and it's the appropriate question. Garland was most likely rumored to San Antonio once the Mitchell extension was supposed, like almost kind of a foregone conclusion that was going to happen. With Chris Paul becoming available, I don't know that Garland's path there is still as clear as it might have been, previous to that. And then now, does this allow another team like the aforementioned Lakers, to kind of get into this conversation, or somebody else who's lacking a point guard at this stage? But I think the pairing of Garland and Mitchell, I think we've seen the last of it, honestly. And if Garland's camp, which is the Clutch camp, was out there saying, hey, if you resign him, then we need to move him. And we've seen Clutch movements throughout the course of this regular season, this offseason already. And, hey, they are aggressive and they get things done for their guys. So where Garland lands up, we don't know. But I don't think he'll be back in the Cleveland Cavalier uniform going into next season. And on the Mitchell side, I want to give shout outs to, I think it was the Hoop Collective podcast, because instead of signing a 4-year maximum, Mitchell signs a 3-year maximum, which allows him to get to the 10-year mark at the end of that, where he can get an even more substantial raise as a 10-year NBA veteran. So all these things, it's always about the now dollars and the future dollars that I think is being considered. And I'm not mad at it in any way. But if people were wondering why the Cavs didn't give him, the super max, if you will, in terms of the full max, in terms of years, that's the reason why he wants to be able to get out again, so he can hit free agency once he gets that 10 years of service.
I'm going to tell you this, Shaw, and maybe we'll have this conversation later on as we do previews. I am really, really excited and curious to see what Kenny Atkinson can do with Donovan Mitchell, more so than I would have probably been able to see what Kenny Atkinson will do with Darius Garland. I'm not saying that Darius Garland is not a quality guard, and that he has earned the right to be in the conversations.
Sure.
And eventually be on a staff. I think, hey, Atlanta Hawks, maybe you want to pick up the telephone. You know what I'm saying? This could be an opportunity here. I probably would like to see maybe a pairing of Darius Garland and Trae Young, because I do not want to see Trae Young as a point guard. I'd rather see him be the 2 guard and him shoot. I'm just saying, like,
that's no defense at all, bro. And
I understand, but what I'm saying is like, this whole idea of trying to make him like a hybrid guard, I'm just not seeing it. I don't want to get off of the point because it's not about Trae Young. I'm just saying that, like, where the potential might be for Darius Garland to continue to maintain his elevated status. You want to know what I would want to say, and this is no disrespect to Clutch, Paul, and his camp and everything, because you're right, like you said, he gets their players what they want, and essentially what his management team wants, right? But I want to know what the success rate really is for a lot of these players. Like, after they got their deal, after they got what they got, where are these guys now? Right? How much of this has completely worked out for them, as well as for the organizations who took that chance, who conceded to those demands that are being met? Because I think that that's the other side to the coin. You hear what I mean? And so with someone like a Darius Garland, he's someone that's kind of like he's on the fence, right? He's on the fence. And we're gonna have the same conversation with Draymond Green, right? Because he certainly got what he wanted from the Golden State Warriors, and look what happened this past year, right? So I'll be very curious to see what happens to a lot of these guys after they get what it is that they want, because I don't know if it's so much the fact that they're getting what they're asking for or they're getting what is best suited for them to be successful for what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And so that'll be interesting to see what happens, because I agree with you, Shaw. If you're the Los Angeles Lakers and you clearly want an upgrade at the point guard position, you really should be looking into this possibility to Darius Garland, because he's young enough. He can still kind of fit in with the hierarchy of LeBron and with AD, and he could be under the tutelage of a guy like JJ Redick, who I think can easily be in his ear about how you get that ball to that guy coming off, the screen, how you get that guy in his spot as a shooter. I think he can enhance that from a player who receives that basketball more so than the one who is always, giving those basketball. Maybe it won't be as hard of a sell to a guard like Darius. But at the same time, my biggest concern for Darius has always been the fact that he's never been aggressive enough. He's never been someone to just take the bull by the horns and go after it. So it'll be interesting to see what this will do for him and where he winds up being that will elevate that or command that need. Because whatever it is, I'm sure that's what's going to be asked of him.
Yeah, there's not a lot of winning situations. The losing ones, would you put him in Toronto alongside quickly? Probably not. That's worse than he and Trae Young, in Atlanta probably. Brooklyn, another losing situation. Maybe Utah, but they're not really sure what direction they're ultimately going. So I think the only winning situation potentially you could go to would be the Lakers. Obviously, the clutch connection is very prevalent there. The Heat might sniff around, but you're not really sure what they're going to do. And they obviously have Rozier and Tyler Hero, a lot of combo guards already, in that mold. So I don't know if they want to get in that. Washington, another losing situation, that could take place for them. The best winning situation, but they have no way of actually acquiring them is Phoenix. They could obviously utilize a point guard, but they have no realistic path to get to him based on all the equity they've already sent out, in their other deals. So I think it's going to be a tough situation for Garland. And while, again, I don't think he'll be back in Cleveland, it's not going to be the easiest of deals to kind of get done unless some other team is really unhappy with their current point guard and want to move that person out to make room for Garland.
All right. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we got a little Warrior action going on, and the Charlotte Hornets. They are actually in the conversations. Some good, maybe some bad, but you'll find out where we're on that part of that scale. So don't go away. Hear more Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw. We're back, Callie, Warren, Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. The Golden State Warriors, Shaw, making moves. They decided to get slow-mo. Our man Kyle Anderson signed a trade deal. He's going to do a 3-year, $27 million deal. The Warriors also cop Buddy Hield, pride of the Bahamas, on a 2-year, $21 million deal. And then they've also added Terry Stotts and Jerry Stackhouse as their assistants. I'm curious, Shaw, are you more enamored with the coaching hires or are you enamored with the player acquisitions?
The player acquisitions, why I think Stotts and Stackhouse are going to be great assistants, and fills the road of Atkinson moving on, into Cleveland. Hield coming into this is pretty big. There's a lot being made about him being one of the more prolific three-point shooters. A lot of people don't realize that, but in terms of makes, I think he's only second behind Curry, in the last, 4 to 5 years, even more. Obviously, Klay's been hurt.
Actually, he's made more three-pointers since 2019. But yes, that 2018-19 season, Steph Curry was injured for most of that year. But as far as makes, three-point field goals made, Buddy Hield has made the most 3-point shots between the two of them in the last 4 years.
So in terms of style of play offensively, it allows them to do some things that they have been doing, maybe even more so with Klay, but Klay's probably a little bit better off the move, and Buddy's probably better catch and shoot, or well, not better, just as good, if you will, but Klay's better overall, in his total body of work. But there's going to be the defensive stuff here that I guess they're hoping Kyle Anderson will be able to fill. They also got D'Anthony Melton. We talked about that deal last time as well. So the Warriors, for all things considered, they got playable pieces. And remember, Kuminga and Moody are only getting better, or presumably so. So the Warriors, I'm not writing them off per se, and I think the Klay stuff is ugly, and a lot of people want to dance on their proverbial grave as a result of it, only getting 2 second-round picks back, for a legend in the Bay Area. But I think for what it has been, Dunleavy's done a decent job of retooling this roster, and now it'll be up to Kerr, now Stotts and Stackhouse, to figure out how to make that roster work and be competitive next season. And I think we'll still hear from this Warriors team. I'm not going to go out and say, title contention or anything like that too, but they should still be, over 500 team with a shot of getting in the play-in or even securing a top 6 spot. And then from there, you have Steph Curry, one of the best to ever do it. And that can be very problematic for a lot of different teams out there. So the Warriors are not dead yet. They're just different. And I think we need to recognize that and be okay with that, because it seems to be that they are okay with it.
Yeah, the Warriors are not dead yet. But I do think that this team now looks very different.
Sure.
And I'm going to lean more on the fact that them getting Terry Stotts and Jerry Stackhouse as assistants, I think, is going to be more prevalent for them. I don't know, man. Listen, for the last few years, I've still been wondering what Steve Kerr really is trying to do with this team. And there have been moments where I think he's been very resistant into letting the young guys cook, let the young guys go out and play, because he's been so adamant on, holding together the crew. I think he was instrumental in some ways in maybe trying to soften the blow of what was taking place with Klay Thompson and the Warriors organization. This is something that really should have been dealt with maybe 2-3 years ago. And whether that is at the, whether that's the Warriors' fault, whatever. I know people are looking more at what the Warriors didn't get. This problem was not something that just was because of the fact that they weren't trying to get an extension or anything. This is going back to after Klay Thompson had, suffered that ACL the ACL injury, again. And then he had a setback when he was trying to return, right? And you could clearly tell that Klay Thompson no longer can operate and play in the kind of offense that they were trying to do, and that what he gave them on both sides of the basketball. And again, you can point fingers at so many different things about this, but I think at the end of the day, I think having Terry Stotts and having Jerry Stackhouse, there's got to be somebody who's going to be able to really get in the ear of Steve Kerr and really start acknowledging and recognizing where this team should be trending. He can no longer stymie the youth movement that is there simply because it's really about Steph Curry trying to shine, or it's about Draymond Green. Now that you have broken up the core, right? This is about wins, and you have to make sure that you are putting out the best roster that is going to give you the best opportunity to win. It may even require you to change the way that you play a little bit, which may mean Steph Curry might have to facilitate more. Listen, Shaw, I'm just saying this right now. Watch what happens, because this has been, to me, what I've seen over the last couple of years with Steph Curry. He comes out hot, right? He comes out hot, like he's already in the MVP conversation. And then as you get down to the second half of the season, you can clearly see he's either flamed out or his numbers have dipped, okay? So it's either you're relying too much on him through the course of the regular season, and he's just kind of pacing himself to prepare for what they think is supposed to be a postseason run. Then they play themselves into trouble and can't get out of the play-in. It's all or nothing with them. I am going to be very curious to see what this team is going to look like under Steve Kerr with the kind of pieces that they have. Can Hield thrive? Can Kyle Anderson thrive? Will Moody and Kuminga take another step up? You know what I'm saying? I'm really curious to see what happens with all of this stuff, because this is more than just you're filling in the gap and then just being competitive. It's really also a reflection about how the Warriors truly see themselves, if they really buy into the idea that this team is going to be a better, well-rounded team, or this team is still going to be solely dependent on the Curry effect.
Well, Curry is the key, right? I think, but you alluded to, you don't want to wear him down. So can their distribution of offensive responsibility specifically be shared throughout Kuminga, Moody, Pajemski, even, coming into that, and obviously the addition of Hield. Anderson is more of a connective piece, intangibles, rebounder, defense, make the hockey assist type of dude, and he'll hit a couple baskets here and there. But it really is that youth movement that you're alluding to that is now looking to take into the offensive load that Klay is leaving behind, obviously with the addition of Buddy Hield as well too. So the Warriors do have to be different. And it would be interesting, like if a guy like Stackhouse can get in the ear, especially of those young guys, because I believe Stackhouse is coming from the college ranks, I believe, or was he in the G League? I can't remember specifically. But either way, youth development is something should have been his most recent specialty. And I think he can be the guy that can, like you said, get in the ears of some of those young guys and then be the bridge to Steve Kerr. It's like, hey, you know what? Pajemski's ready here. Like give him a couple more looks. Kuminga's ready to rock here. So that I think will benefit the Warriors both short term and long term, and hopefully extend Curry's career. Because we don't want to see him go anywhere. We don't want to see him continue to wear down in the key moments of the Warrior season.
One other thing too, Shaw, and I want to see is if whether or not the Warriors are going to step up with the type of players that they have. Again, I think volume is going to be key for them. Also, in the number of shots that they're taking, how many shots they're taking. Do they have enough to give themselves additional opportunities to shoot that basketball? I don't know if they're going to be as accurate as the days of the Splash Brothers and the role players that they've had, filling in to put them on those kind of runs that they were going to, even when they didn't win a championship. So there's going to be a lot of hit and misses. That means that they need guys who are going to basically be underneath that basket. And listen, I know they can get that from Pajemski. He's shown that he can do that. You need more of that from Kuminga. You need more of that from Moody, right? And you may even need that from Buddy Hield. Like, these are the kind of intangibles that have always been question marks for a lot of these guys who have been in the league already for some time, but have never been able to stick and stay with a team for so many years. Or when you have young guys where you talk about their upside, but always these little things that kind of become deterrents or demerits, so to speak, on why they're not getting the type of level of playing time. Because if they're just not making the shots, Kerr's already pulling them, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. All right, y'all, let's focus our attention on the Charlotte Hornets. I said before, Charlotte Hornets made some moves. Some of it might seem good, and some of it might not seem so good. They've decided to extend Miles Bridges, or there's an agreement between Miles Bridges and the Hornets. He's going to stay with them for 3 years, $75 million. They've also added Reggie Jackson and Josh Green to their roster. This is an extension from the big deal that took place with the Dallas Mavericks getting Klay Thompson, an historic 6-team trade deal. And then in that process, Davis Bertans and Alexis Buzevsky have been waived.
Poco. Call him Poco.
Poco. Poco's no-go with the Charlotte Hornets. I will say, Shaw, I was a little amused by I was watching something on Instagram. I guess they somehow was able to interview Davis while he was actually competing in the Euro tournament for Latvia. And they said, we want to know what your thoughts today of you being waived by the Charlotte Hornets. And I completely enjoyed his response. He's like, honestly, I don't care. He's like, because all that matters to me right now is the jersey that I'm currently wearing right now and the team that I'm playing for, and that's for my country because we're trying to get in and compete in the Olympics. And I thought that was well said, but it also was just basically a slap in the face to the Charlotte Hornets. Like, you waved me, man. What else? He's like, I'm living my best life here in Latvia and playing for, playing for the Charlotte freaking Hornets right now. I mean, what does that tell you, man? It's crazy.
Well, I mean, it's dual fold, right? If the Charlotte Hornets are waving you, the Charlotte Hornets aren't exactly a good team at the same time.
But they're just not a good team for doing what they did. I think you could have seriously, what doing what you did now, you couldn't have waited to do after he finished competing. It wasn't like Davis did you dirty, did you wrong. He came and he played and competed, for your organization. He's out there playing basketball and competing for his country, and you do this. The optics, to me, hurt more to the Charlotte Hornets, speaks more to the Charlotte Hornets, just lack of
I mean, it's the business though, right? And then to make room for Bridges, and then I think the Hornets are slightly better than they were last year at this time. I mean, you think Hayward is gone now, Terry Rozier is gone now. You bring in, an up and coming, if you will, Josh Green from the Dallas Mavericks, fresh off a finals run. Whatever you want to say about Miles Bridges in terms of his off the court, I mean, all those things are valid, but his on the court, at least for Charlotte, there seems to be some sort of connection there that they like. So good for them. He gets to be in that role and step into that. And then you presumably get LaMelo back, knock on wood. So Charlotte feels a little bit better about themselves, but then they didn't want to continue to pay the tax for a team that's not going to be all that great. So Davis Bertans is $16 million. So if you don't have to pay it, why pay it? And I think the timing of it is just, that's just kind of par for the course here. Bertans will have an opportunity to probably catch on with somebody else, especially, if that amount becomes non-guaranteed, he clears waivers, he gets signed for a veteran minimum. You get a 6'8", 6'10" shooter coming off your bench, even if it's end of the bench guy. A lot of teams would sign up for that. Or he can go to stay in Europe and I think have a very, very solid career. Charlotte is in a very interesting situation with Brandon Miller, Grant Williams also there as well too. There's just no need for a Davis Bertans or a Poku to kind of even be there moving forward. Although the Poku stuff was interesting because they were like, we felt like we got a steal when they claimed him off waivers off of OKC. This is a guy we really want to develop, and then 8 months later he's on waivers. So Charlotte continues to Charlotte. But they are moving in a pseudo right direction, I guess, with some of these moves in terms of talent. We'll see how it plays out on the court.
Snatch a wig. Oh, wrong rig. Yeah. Finally, Shaw, before we end our show, man, it's been announced that our man, the alchemist, our man Kemba Walker, he's hanging up the sneaks with the NBA. Oh, he's actually hanging it up, playing basketball altogether. We talked about it off the, off air. I'm saddened by the fact that, Kemba Walker really didn't have his true opportunity to compete. I really don't think people really appreciated, how dogged, how really solid of a player he was. He basically shouldered, at the time, was the Charlotte Bobcats, right? He essentially was, the Simba of the Bobcats jungle that was going on over there for quite a bit of time. And there were those brief moments where, you would have hoped that he would have gotten the requisite help for the teams that he played with, for them to be competitive. He had a couple of seasons where he played such an all-star level. But I think health and obviously the fact that he was among guards, he was like, one of the smaller guards at a time where larger guards were much more prevalent. Never really developed the shot that I think would have kept him in the league a lot longer. But damn, he was a great player, and he was really fun to watch. And I do want to wish him all the best with what he, did with not just his career, but clearly what he's going to do moving forward.
Yeah, he's going to take a role with the aforementioned Charlotte Hornets as a player development coach. So I think that's befitting and great for the Charlotte Hornets to kind of bring back somebody who's meant so much for them. Yes, he got traded and moved on to Boston, New York, and then I guess it was OKC was his last stop, in the NBA, or it might have been somewhere else. I can't remember. But either way, he's
Dallas, but you're probably right. Could have been OKC.
But he's everybody says what a solid individual. Great competitor, even better human being and teammate. So I think Charlotte is, again, doing the right thing here by bringing him into their organization and getting him to be around some of that young talent that could utilize some grooming and some professionalism by the likes of someone like Kemba Walker. So shout to him for a great career. In terms of what we were able to see in the time that he was here. And while he won't be a Hall of Famer, he is, a New York basketball legend, if you will, UConn legend. So I'm glad that he'll still be around the game that he loves so much. And, we wish him all the best.
Absolutely, man. Great show altogether, man. Like we said, a lot of stuff happening in the association. And now we focus our attention to Summer League.
Summer League it is, fam. And yeah, all the big names are more or less off the table. So the next time we meet, which will probably be a couple weeks from now, so a listening programming note for our listeners here, as the summer kind of comes into full view, we'll be taking some time off, if you will, and also just spacing out the show a little bit. So every 2 weeks, as we lead back into training camp in, September, but it's still going to be really great stuff to have some conversations about USA basketball here, and the Olympics coming up in August as well. So we won't be going too far. Hopefully you'll continue to stay with us, tap into our socials as well too, but always an amazing time from the Baseline NBA podcast.
Absolutely. For the Baseline, Callie, Warren, Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for hopping on board with us this week. We'll catch up with you next time.